What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. League of Legends has had an extremely long lifespan and really doesn't have that much of an end in sight, which is honestly kind of mind-blowing. I mean, the game first released in 2009 of October, which means the game will be going 10 years strong coming next October. That's pretty insane to think about, very few games actually last that long with a pretty consistent popularity that League of Legends has maintained. It's definitely a very impressive feat and nothing that should be taken lightly, but with that said, we're going to dive back into the early years before us and have a fun little blast from the past, and today we've put together a list for the real OG League of Legends players, so hope you guys enjoy the nostalgia trip, or maybe if you're a new player, learn something new. And if you enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button or let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for some more videos. And without further ado, let's jump right into the list. So first up on our list, we have the infamous dodge mechanic that used to be in League of Legends back in the day. It was originally on a bunch of items that gave some sort of tank stats. Most notably, items like Ninja Tabby and Phantom Dancer had dodge stats tied into them. Champions in the game also had dodge-based abilities, most notably Jax especially, but also Nidalee, Sivir, and Udyr, as well as a few others. The mechanic in general though was considered to be a poor design choice for League of Legends. The only real counter to it at the time was the Sword of the Divine, which prevented all basic attacks from being dodged for 8 seconds with its active. However, this counter wasn't really all that great because the item wasn't that strong, so it just wasn't reliable, much like the mechanic itself. It was considered to be anti-fun and added way too much RNG to the game. I mean, the complete and utter chance that an attack could just randomly miss and do no damage is probably not the best of design choices for a game like League of Legends. With that said though, it's definitely something that exists in the game for quite some time, and a lot of players probably remember it as something that was fun, especially if you played Jax. Next up, oh man, this one is just crazy. This one is a real throwback, and that was the WCG tournament in 2010. The tournament was region-based and it was won by USA. At the time, it was Counterlogic Gaming, most notably when they had Kobe on the team, who is now Riot Kobe. Man, just thinking about that is such a throwback. I mean, honestly, looking at this footage is crazy. I mean, the game is so different back then. They didn't even have the spectator mode system created yet, so they instead programmed an entire summoner spell just for the Riot staff. The summoner spell was called Observer, and a 6th player would enter the game and use the spell, and that was basically how they spectated tournaments back then, because the summoner spell would reveal the whole map and make all of the fog of war visible. This is honestly just so amazing to look back at. I mean, if we just try to comprehend the esports and tournaments that we know today and compare them to where it started, it really goes to show how far the game and Riot Games as a company as a whole has come. Next up on our list, we have something that is honestly just a classic, and that's Freak's April Fool's Lee Sin video. Now this is truly a classic. I think it was the first April Fool's joke Riot Games ever made. Not only was the video entertaining and funny to watch, but some of the quotes are just so amazing. Let's play a couple of the iconic lines that come from this video.
Lee Sin is a ranged melee, tanky DPS, assassin, mage, tank, support, jungler. He excels at everything. On arrival, I walk up to the summoner platform and kill them all with Tempest. However, I do eventually decide to win the game, so I walk up to an enemy champion and use Dragon's Rage to kick it into the enemy nexus, immediately destroying it and winning the game.
There's also a bunch of other great stuff, and I suggest you watch the entire video yourselves if you haven't already seen it. Riot's always been kind of great at interacting with the community in all sorts of fun ways, and this was no exception to that. Next, I wanted to take a look at the summoner spell that was removed from the game way back in the day, known as Rally. This spell would summon a beacon for 15 seconds on the map that increased the attack speed of nearby allies, as well as yourself of course, by 10 to 35 damage, scaling based on level. This spell was especially interesting because it actually affected all allied units, including minions as well, such as Heimerdinger turrets. While this summoner spell really wasn't used all that often, it did spawn some really hilarious strategies, and it was kind of iconic for new players to use without really knowing how bad it was. Definitely it was mostly used by just newer players, and it was also used of course by Heimerdinger mains. I can't say exactly for myself since I was never really a big Heimerdinger player, but it was apparently really powerful as the damage affected each turret. And this was back at a time when Heimerdinger was able to place 6 turrets on the map, so you can imagine it would be pretty crazy. And it definitely allowed him to siege with minions way faster and just really push down towers and do all sorts of crazy insanity. However, it was removed in patch 129. Now next up, I wanted to take a look at something that isn't quite as old as the other things on this list, but I think it definitely earns a worthy spot as it's something that probably a lot of players out there have a lot of nostalgia for. Prior to Season 3, League of Legends used to use a whole different ranking system, known as just the ELO system. This system used straight up numbers to rank players between Bronze through Platinum, which was originally the highest rank tier back in Season 1. Eventually, all sorts of players began to pass the rating required for Platinum, and they started to move up to even 2200 rating and beyond, and this is when Riot decided to add in the Diamond ranking tier as we know today. Once Season 3 arrived, Riot reworked the entire ranking system to the one we still use now, after which a lot of players were actually very unhappy with the change, and even to this day, there's still quite a few people in the community that want the old ranking system back. Notably, probably the largest difference in the older ranking system versus today was just the ease of going up and down between different tiers. There was no buffer time between promotions and demotions, and there was no series of matches for players to play, so it meant that you could be in Platinum in one game, win, get Diamond in the next, lose a game, and drop back down to Platinum. But despite the backlash upon the original release of the new ranking system, after quite a lot of tweaks and changes from Riot, it definitely improved quite a lot, and now I think you can say there's some pros and cons to the differences between the two systems, and overall, the new system is probably for the best. Next up, we have a League of Legends map that actually doesn't exist in the game anymore, and it was the Proving Grounds. This basic map was created to of course teach new players the basic gameplay and mechanics of League of Legends, and notably was essentially the map that the tutorial was played on. However, this map was actually released for the sake of the ARAM mode. It was released in a version that was actually for custom games only before the Howling Abyss. Before this point, players had to play ARAM on the normal Summoner's Rift map with no setting changes, which means players would receive like such a tiny amount of experience and gold throughout the match, which led to crazy long ARAM matches, as it just took forever for players to actually level up on the shared XP from minions in one lane. And so Riot released the Proving Grounds, but it was only accessible in custom games as a way to just kind of cater to the ARAM community. Eventually, the Proving Grounds map went to inspire the Howling Abyss, which in turn, of course, became the ARAM mode that we all know and love to this day. Next up, we've got a throwback to the ultimate tank-killing item that was removed. It was Madrids Blood Razor. The item cost 3,800 gold and gave the player 20 armor, 40 attack damage, and 40% attack speed. However, it was the passive that made it a crazy iconic item. The unique passive allowed your basic attacks to deal bonus magic damage equal to 4% of the target's maximum health. Notably, it was magic damage, so it kind of gave AD carry players a way to build mixed damage, and it was especially strong to use on Kog'Maw. I know my Kog'Maw players out there definitely love this one. The item was just crazy strong against tanks, and considering it was magic damage, it meant that tanks would have to build split resistances, and it's just an item that a lot of players remember fondly from back in the day. It was later removed on patch 152, and with that being said, I gotta give a quick shout out to everyone's favorite removed item from the game, of course. It's Heart of Gold, as it was actually removed in the same patch as Madrids Blood Razor as well. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to take a look at, it's just an old mechanic that used to exist in League of Legends, and it came in more than one form, and that was the infamous Mana Leech effects. Most notably, however, were the versions on Kassadin's W and Ryze's E that would actually drain mana from the target on auto attacks. The mechanic was actually something that carried over from Warcraft 3, where mana drain is fairly relevant in that game, because in Warcraft 3, it only takes like 2 or 3, maybe 4 spells to completely run out of mana, and the mana regeneration as well is also extremely slow, and it's supplemented by having all sorts of like mana leech effects. Essentially effects where you would steal mana from your opponents and mana would get drained from them and given to you. Another thing to note is that Mana Leech actually also existed on some items, although I think most, if not actually all of the items that had Mana Leech on them never made it past the alpha stage of the game, as they were deemed to be an anti-fun design and just generally unnecessary, and on the other hand, Kassadin and Ryze were more so designed to be like anti-mage characters at the time, so the mechanic still kind of made sense on those characters, but it didn't make sense to have on general items. The mechanic and its small relevance in League of Legends was later removed, and we definitely haven't seen a similar mechanic since, and probably never will again. And last but not least, it was just a fun little event, the Ionia vs Knox's show match way back in the day. Back then, Riot had this like crazy lore event show match, which was an event for Knox's vs Ionia that was going on, and they had a show match between the two factions with just, players playing champions from the respective zone on each team, with the winner getting an in-game item named after them. Ionia won the show match, and in return we were given the Ionian Boots of Lucidity shortly thereafter. It's a pretty cool origin story for an item that's still relevant and in the game today. I'd also like to mention that in this show match, most notably Guardsman Bob dominated using Udyr and Innervating Locket, a recently released item at the time, which proved to just be insanely overpowered, or really Guardsman Bob proved it. In general, it's kind of crazy how Riot had this entire show match event based on their own game's lore. Sadly though, it never really caught on, and we haven't really seen something similar since then, but it was definitely a great attempt by Riot to bring the community together though, and it's something that kind of still had an impact on the game today, as Innervating Locket was removed from the game pretty much as a result. As well, we also got the Ionian Boots of Lucidity being named after the winners as well.
Getting away with no health, and that was a triple kill for the Ionian-born Udyr.
Guardsman Bob scored a triple kill there. Ionia crushed in that exchange. Absolutely crushed. Knox cannot be happy.
Hopefully you enjoyed this video and maybe appreciated the throwbacks, or maybe learned something new that you didn't know about League of Legends in the process. If you enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this one in the future. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.